as I've been saying throughout this video. If you've been watching for a while, you know my theory. These beings existed here before us. Some of the craft are ours for sure, but I doubt the actual truth will ever be revealed, at least not fully. They have far too much to lose if they do. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like and hit that sub button. Sharing the video on social media also helps us grow our Woken family. But for now, stay safe, stay well, and stay curious. Until next time.
All reactions in these videos are for entertainment purposes only. Any advice given should be treated as entertainment as well. Viewers are responsible for conducting their own research into any subjects discussed in the videos before taking any action based on the information provided.